You were never meant to whisper so others feel safe. Some of us weren't meant to soften systems, but to dissolve them through presence.
Welcome to the Remembrance Codes. I'm your host, Susan Sutherland, and I'm glad you're here. Today's episode is for the ones that feel truth rising like the tide, unstoppable, even when it's inconvenient, even when it's unpopular, even when it costs them something. It's for those of us who came not to shout, but to speak clean, not to perform, but to dismantle distortion by simply being clear. So let's talk about what happens when the truth you carry begins to tremble the grid. For a while, I have carried big truth quietly, knowings that don't impose that wait for an invitation. But something has shifted recently as I have gained clarity and capacity and perhaps most importantly, courage. Truth is asking to be shared, and sometimes it is in an offering, and sometimes it is in a correction. And y'all, that's challenging. But there is a very large church in my area that is doing a series on Revelation, and a Facebook friend posted her findings about the sermon, and while she offered it as hope for the believers, it was wrapped in the religious dogma of if you believe, you go to heaven, and if you don't believe, you go to hell forever. For a while, I would have just scrolled by the person posting about the series, but this time, truth wouldn't let me. So I took some time, I stepped back from it to really sit in the message and to feel into how truth would have me respond. And I posted, fear wrapped in scripture is still fear. And a long post that basically says sermons spoken of a transactional Christ and a wrathful God, even if spoken from a pulpit, are not in truth. And on Instagram, within a day, I think I lost 25 followers, and I noticed, in fact, I must have anticipated it because I don't think normally I would even know how many followers I had to have lost any, but I didn't flinch. And there was a time when I would have taken that personally, or I would have maybe withdrawn the message or wondered if I should have softened it or if I could have worded it better. But this time, I simply knew. Truth trembles what is not in truth. And that's what it's meant to do. And here's the thing. Some people don't want their beliefs challenged. They don't want cracks in their foundation. Because if they really looked at what you're sharing, at what I'm sharing, it may require them to unlearn something they've built their life upon. And that's terrifying. So it's easier to look away, to unfollow, to scroll past the uncomfortable thing and re-anchor in what feels safe, even if that safety is an illusion. And I get it. I've been there. And y'all, there are spouses all over this country that are pretending not to see all of the signs of infidelity because if they really knew, they might need to make a change. So they blur their vision. They pretend not to see. Because not knowing allows them to keep on with their lives. Not perfect, but the safety of the illusion that they're willing to walk. But here's your reminder that the truth does not require agreement to be holy. It just requires presence and sometimes a little courage. So do not measure your impact based on how well it's received, whether or not it's interacted with, because truth spoken from a clear channel ripples. That is really important to remember in a world that is built on metrics and algorithm feedback. But for many of us, we are building frequency fields, not followings. That's why I recently left an energetic coaching group, is not because anything was wrong with it. There are beautiful people doing beautiful work, and many of them are learning to get their messages out there by building a funnel to their products and services. And that is in high alignment. But when I was focusing on the task in that way, it felt performative instead of present. And that, in addition to doing some other work that I'm working on right now that is calling me inward, I had to choose to step away. I'm not here to perform. I'm not here to tweak my frequency so it fits the algorithm. I'm here to transmit truth, clean and rooted and alive, even if it doesn't go viral. I also had to make changes on YouTube. I was tracking my journey to monetization, which had me really focused on doing things YouTube's way, performing in a way that does suit algorithms. And it fell out of alignment. I couldn't do that anymore. And I have to trust my timing and the resonance of my field. And it doesn't mean I don't take aligned actions, but I can't take them in effort to meet a system that I'm working outside of. I actually started looking for help with my editing and with my YouTube thumbnails to communicate to thumbnail creators that I don't want bold, catching, fear-mongering thumbnails was really tricky, because that is the YouTube way. It's like, the end of the world, click here. You'll never believe this, click here. And fear is not my message. And so to find someone and begin a working relationship where I can tailor thumbnails even to hold a frequency that is an invitation and not an alarm bell is part of working outside of the system that we've created that is fear-inducing and clickbaitish. And even if that works for an algorithm, for traction, for growing an audience, it doesn't work for my resonance. And so I've had to shift how I'm doing everything, and that's okay. And making these choices to leave the group and to shift my YouTube presence is not a rejection. It is a reclamation. It is honoring myself in my message, knowing that it does not need to be resized to be real, and it doesn't need to be liked to have ripple. Because here's the thing, y'all. Clean truth shifts the grid just because it's spoken, just because it's shared. So let's talk about what truth feels like when it's spoken from a clear place. It doesn't always sound angry. It doesn't always feel disruptive. Sometimes it is so still, so rooted, so precise that distortion simply can't remain in its presence. And it's not always visible, but it works in the field. So imagine when you plant or you bury a crystal beneath the soil. You don't see it above ground, but it hums in the roots. It aligns the water. It shifts the structure underneath. And that's what happens when you speak truth from a clean channel. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need instant feedback or results. It vibrates beyond what you see. And that's why we keep showing up. Also, remember that sometimes, I would say often, those you think aren't listening are. There's a man, a minister, who never engages with my content publicly, but I feel him when I post. He shows up in the energy. And the other day, he made a post that felt like a counterpost to mine, a counterpoint to something I had said. No tags, no interaction. But the field doesn't lie. People are listening. Even when they don't clap or share or say a word, even when it is a rebuttal. The truth was felt and often is greeted with a yeah, but. But I can assure you, truth doesn't mind being questioned. So if you feel unseen in your truth, keep sharing. It's moving. It's working. It's rippling in ways you may never get credit for, but the field knows. Now, I want to add some nuance here because this isn't about being reckless. We are not truth bulldozers. It's about being clear. I walk differently on different platforms, not because I'm diluting the truth, but because I'm honoring tone. And I know there are platforms where people found me by resonance, and there are platforms where people found me by proximity. I grew up near them. I had a child in the same playgroup. I understand that the audience is different. And what I've learned from parenting and partnership and from life is that how something is said often determines if it is heard. So we don't water down the medicine, but we also don't force it down in a horse fill either. Effective truth doesn't mean antagonizing. Sometimes it's the softest. It does disrupt, but it doesn't have to destroy. And truth tellers, I know it may be hard, but we don't only speak in rooms of agreement. The world doesn't need more echo chambers. It needs words that pierce cleanly, not argumentatively. Truth just stands. And sometimes that requires discernment, not compromise. It is amazing because I can look back at a podcast episode I did 2 years ago about religion and spirituality, and it was really the first time I had come out publicly and said, I don't believe what I was raised to believe. And y'all, I was terrified to put that out there. I felt so vulnerable and nervous, and I guess I was worried about who would walk away and who would judge me and what I would lose in the process. And I almost didn't do it. And now that episode feels so small. It feels so obvious and so light, so not terrifying at all, because my voice has expanded. Because my container of truth has grown. Because when you speak the hard thing once, you're able to hold more. And that's how truth works. You speak it, even trembling, and your capacity stretches. And what once felt like a mountain becomes a stepping stone. And y'all, some of us came here to hold this line, to say the hard thing, to name the distortion, not with a hammer, but with clarity, so sharp and so honest and so clean that illusion can no longer stand in its presence. You don't have to yell, and you don't have to argue. You just have to speak. Your words carry codes, and when they're spoken from alignment, they don't just land, they reverberate. If the world is trembling around your truth, it means you are holding a frequency that illusion cannot withstand. Speak anyway. Speak clean. Speak from the stillness where you know. You were never meant to whisper so others feel safe. You were meant to vibrate so clearly that systems of distortion fall away. Not because you fought them, but because they could not survive in the presence of what is real. If this episode stirred something in you, send it to someone else that is walking this line. Someone on the edge of their own mountain. And if you're still finding your truth, know this. Your voice doesn't have to be loud to be holy. It just has to be yours. Thank you so much for listening and for speaking your words in clarity and in truth.